Hitmen, or contract killers, are people who enter illegal agreements in which another party offers them a form of payment, usually monetary, for murdering someone. Hitmen may be employed by single entities or various criminal organizations, such as the Italian Mafia, the Triads, or the Yakuza. The reasons for hiring a hitman vary depending on the employer and may be connected to money, revenge, territorial disputes, and more. From a legal standpoint, both parties involved in the contract may be found guilty of murder, and even if the hit is not carried out, they might still face attempted murder charges. From the hirer's perspective, employing a hitman may be viewed as having multiple advantages. Aside from not performing the actual murder, the employers also distance themselves from any investigation that may arise. This happens due to the fact that there wouldn't be sufficient forensic evidence connecting them to the victim, the crime, or the crime scene. Number 4. Alexander Solonik. Also known as Superkiller, Alexander Solonik was notorious in the Russian criminal underworld for being an extremely prolific contract killer. Solonik had an impressive skill set. He was ambidextrous, and he had received firearm and martial arts training after being conscripted into the Soviet army. After his conscription ended, he began working for the OMON police agency, but was later expelled for being extremely violent towards suspects. In 1987, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison following a rape charge. Before being imprisoned, during a farewell meeting with his spouse, Solonik jumped from the second floor of the building and escaped. Several months later, he was apprehended and taken to prison. Because he had worked for the police, Solonik became a target in prison. Solonik quickly earned the respect of the other inmates after reportedly taking out as many as 12 attackers at a time. After an incarceration period of 2 years, he escaped once more. Upon returning to his home in Kurgan, Solonik began working as a hitman for a locally based criminal organization. His reputation steadily grew as he took out many rival mob heads in Moscow and Kurgan. Valery Dlugach, a well-known Moscow underworld figure and one of Solonik's victims, was shot in a nightclub while he was surrounded by his bodyguards. Solonik became infamous among both criminals and law enforcement officials. He was apprehended by Moscow police in a marketplace while he was having drinks with one of his criminal affiliates. The police officers did not search Solonik properly, and he opened fire in the police station using an automatic weapon which he had concealed in his raincoat. 5 police officers were shot, and Solonik received a bullet in one of his kidneys. He was eventually overpowered and sent to prison. After undergoing an operation that removed the bullet from his kidney, Solonik escaped prison once more in 1995 with the help of Sergei Menshikov, a prison guard working for the mob. The guard gave him a handgun and climbing equipment, which Solonik used to rappel down from the prison's roof. Despite being well known throughout Russia, he managed to successfully evade capture. Superkiller resurfaced in Athens under a fake passport, this time at the head of his own criminal organization. Solonik's outfit was 50 men strong and dealt primarily with contract killing and drug smuggling. Greek officials claimed to have found Solonik's body 15 miles from Athens in February 1997. It was reported that he had been strangled to death. However, the body did not have identification documents on it. There have been widespread suspicions that Solonik faked his own death and that he is still alive in the underworld, still carrying out contracts. Hitmen may be located anywhere in the world. Some are even hired by different governments as independent contractors in situations that are diplomatically sensitive. Historically, there have been cases in which the use of hitmen was highly publicized. In the United States, during the 1930s and the 1940s, the enforcement groups tasked with carrying out different killings or hits were united under one name by the press. They were called Murder Incorporated. While working for the National Crime Syndicate, these criminal groups were responsible for hundreds of contract killings. In more recent years, a study released by the Australian Institute of Criminology that took place between 1989 and 2002 revealed that the most common reason for contract killings in Australia were insurance policy payouts. The same study showed that the lowest price for a hit was $5,000 and the highest was $30,000, with an average of $15,000 per hit. In Scotland, between 1993 and 2002, 5 85% of all murders were reportedly contract killings. In the Philippines, as part of President Rodrigo Duterte's war on drugs, there have been situations where civilians were paid by the police or various death squads to kill people suspected of dealing drugs. Before he was elected, Duterte promised to kill 100,000 criminals during his first 6 months as president. Number 3. John Jairo Velasquez. You have to understand, I was a professional killer. Whenever I took a life, I didn't feel anything. Not shame, not sadness, not happiness. It was simply like a day at the office, carrying out Don Pablo's orders. John Jairo Velasquez was a lieutenant for Pablo Escobar's criminal organization, the Extraditables. As Escobar's main hitman, Velasquez was involved in over 3,500 killings, 300 of which he reportedly carried out personally. For the hits he took out himself, he was paid up to £75,000. He received the nickname Popeye during his apprenticeship in the Colombian Navy. By his account, he even had to kill his own girlfriend when she was suspected of being a police informant. Escobar allegedly gave him an ultimatum, saying that it would have to be his life or hers. Velasquez was also involved in the kidnapping of mayoral candidate Andres Pastrana Arango, who would later become the president of Colombia from 1998 to 2002. He also played a role in the kidnapping of Francisco Santos, who would become the Republic's vice president. Popeye was also suspected of being involved in the Avianca Flight 203 terrorist attack. On November 27, 1989, a bomb placed on the airplane under orders from Pablo Escobar claimed the lives of all 107 passengers on board. It was one of the deadliest attacks in Colombian history. As the Medellin cartel waged war on the Colombian government and against rival criminal organizations, Velasquez was suspected of orchestrating more than 200 car bombings. Popeye was also behind the killing of the Moncada and Galeano brothers, which took place at La Cathedral, Escobar's private prison. They were suspected of stealing money from the cartel, and after Escobar gave the order, Velasquez admitted to cutting off their arms and legs and then burning the bodies. Popeye surrendered himself to the authorities in 1992 and was given the maximum sentence of 30 years. He was released on the 26th of August, 2014. A team of 4 criminology researchers from the University of Birmingham, led by Professor David Wilson, identified 4 different types of hitman. The classification was a result of several interviews with police officers, convicted criminals, and prison guards. Wilson and his team also analyzed transcripts of court cases, testimonies, and newspaper articles, which described contract killings. Their study was published in the Howard Journal of Criminal Justice, and it detailed the different types of individuals that end up becoming hitmen. The first typology that Wilson and his team identified was the novice. This is usually a person who is at the beginning of a hitman career. The novice is eager to prove themselves as reliable killers in order to impress a criminal organization and to begin creating a reputation. Novices are typically younger and often come from an offending background, according to Professor Wilson. The second type revealed by the study was the dilettante. This is someone older, without a criminal record, that becomes a hitman in order to overcome an immediate crisis, such as paying off a debt. They usually have no desire of advancing in the hierarchy of a criminal organization, and they fall into the contract killer life driven by the rapid nature of the payout. The third category is the journeyman. Journeymen are career criminals who are experienced and reliable. They are the common choice for hits that are commissioned by criminal organizations. Journeymen carry out a large number of contracts. However, their underworld ties and the fact that they operate in their own community make them more vulnerable. Gathering local intelligence becomes easier, which may lead to a quicker identification of the perpetrator. The final typology is that of the master hitman. These are specialists that have had military or paramilitary training. They are comfortable around weapons and know how to obtain and use them. Master hitmen are also forensically aware, knowing how to dispose of evidence and how to cover their tracks. Wilson expressed having faced difficulty in creating an accurate profile for the master hitman, as none of them have ever been caught. The only analysis of their methods come from the hits themselves. In 2000, Frank McPhee, an underworld boss, was assassinated in Glasgow, Scotland. He was killed in front of his son via sniper rifle. Wilson considered it to be the most professional hit to have ever taken place in Britain. Number 2. Richard Kuklinski. Nicknamed the Iceman due to his tendency of freezing his victims in order to mask their time of death, Richard Kuklinski himself claimed to have killed over 200 people between 1948 and 1986. He was a contract killer who was reportedly affiliated with the Di Cavalcante family, the American Mafia, and the New York City's Five Families. The Iceman took his first life while he was still in his teens. He used a clothes hanging rod to beat a neighborhood bully to death. He honed his killing ability by murdering bums and any men that would anger or provoke him. In an interview, he claimed that the hunt excited him, and the more difficult his target was, the more he enjoyed the kill. He managed to elude capture by constantly changing his killing methods. Kuklinski used guns, knives, explosives, tire irons, poison, fire, asphyxiation, and even beatings, which he would dish out with his bare hands. One of his preferred poisons was cyanide because it was fast-acting and hard to trace. The New York underworld caught wind of his criminal activity, and he was contracted for various hits, which he would perform while still maintaining a family life alongside his wife Barbara and their 3 children. For 30 years, his neighbors and family never suspected that he was a contract killer for several criminal organizations. Instead, they thought that he was a successful businessman. Kuklinski's imposing stature of 6.5 feet and 270 pounds led many of his mob affiliates to call him the one-man army or the devil himself. The Iceman became increasingly more careless with the disposal of his victims' bodies, and after an 18-month investigation, he was arrested in 1986. He was charged with 5 murder counts and sentenced to life in prison in 1988. A hitman's techniques and methods are normally subjective and vary depending on each contract. Some are loud and violent, while others are more discreet. In most cases, the contract killer decides the way in which the target will be eliminated. In other situations, where the hitman is more experienced, the employer may request a particular approach. A standard assassination involves the use of a handgun in relatively close quarters. Pistols are easier to obtain and dispose of. Experienced shooters use sniper rifles, which have a higher range and caliber, allowing them to achieve accurate shots from greater distances. Stabbings are typically performed by professionals as they involve getting close to the target, striking with precision, and a well-built exit strategy. Those trained in the use of explosives often opt for placing a device on the victim's car or in their home. More discreet methods involve drugging the victim in order to cause an overdose or a heart attack. This killing technique is based on the hitman observing the target's lifestyle and timing the attack so that it minimizes physical confrontation. A rigorous observation of their target's routine and lifestyle also enables some hitmen to disguise their hits as accidents or suicides. Number 1. Murder Incorporated. The National Crime Syndicate was reportedly founded in May 1929 in Atlantic City during a meeting between some of the most prominent underworld figures of the time. Notable attending members included Al Capone, Lucky Luciano, Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, Johnny Torrio, and many others. Shortly after the syndicate was established, its enforcement branch, dubbed Murder Incorporated by the press, was created. Through Murder Inc., the syndicate hired hitmen to eliminate rival gangsters, witnesses, or even members of their own organization if they were suspected of being disloyal. The groups belonging to Murder Inc. were mainly Jewish and Italian-American gangsters from Brooklyn neighborhoods such as Ocean Hill, Brownsville, and East New York. It was believed that they were behind between 400 to 1,000 contract killings in the 1930s and the early 1940s. Some of the most prolific and notorious killers in United States history were members of Murder Inc. Louis Lepke Buckelcher and Albert Anastasia founded and were the first heads of the organization. Buckelcher orchestrated the murder of Dutch Schultz, a powerful New York mob figure. Schultz proposed in a National Crime Syndicate meeting the assassination of New York District Attorney Thomas Dewey. When his request was denied, Schultz was furious and reportedly claimed that he would disregard syndicate orders and kill Dewey anyway. A hitman commissioned by Buckelcher gunned down Schultz at a Newark tavern on October 23, 1935. This was proof that Murder Inc. was a force to be reckoned with. Albert Anastasia, also known as Lord High Executioner or the Mad Hatter, was the most feared hitman during the American Cosa Nostra Golden Era. He controlled the New York waterfront and the dockworker unions. Anastasia would eventually become the boss of the notorious Gambino crime family. Harry Pittsburgh Phil Strauss was another feared member of the organization who reportedly killed over 100 men. His methods included drowning, live burials, stabbing with ice picks, calisthenics, strangulations, shootings, and others. Harry Mayone, nicknamed Happy due to the perpetual scowl he would have on his face, allegedly carried out 12 contracts while being a member of Murder Inc. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel was a co-founder and among the leaders of the organization. He was one of the 4 gunmen that killed New York crime boss Joe Massaria on April 15, 1931, on a contract from Lucky Luciano. The other 3 would also later become members of Murder Inc. Siegel was also identified by an anonymous source as being one of the triggermen that gunned down Salvatore Maranzano, the mafia's capo di tutti capi, boss of all bosses, while he was in his New York office. This hit was also commissioned by Luciano and would propel him to the top of the United States Mafia, which marked the beginning of the modern organized crime era. Ironically, one of Murder Inc.'s most prolific hitmen also set in motion the organization's downfall. Abraham Kid Twist Rellis was a feared killer, and after his capture by police authorities, he agreed to become an informant for the government. His testimony sent many Murder Inc. members to the electric chair. Others were imprisoned, and in the 1940s, the organization vanished. Apparently, the white supremacist felt he had been wronged by an African-American man during a drug deal, so he was trying to get revenge by killing any black person. Eventually, Russell Henson was sentenced to life behind bars. This January, he was denied parole after he claimed to have found God.